Hi, everybody. It's Thursday, and it's 4 o'clock in New York. It is also day 18 of the people of the state of New York versus Donald Trump. And the ex-president's former attorney, Michael Cohen, is just off the witness stand. The jury is done with their service for the day. Prosecutors and attorneys for the ex-president are dealing with the all-important question of what happens next. It's happening right now, a hearing over what the defense's case will look like and if they will make a case, if they have a case to present. Any updates from that hearing that is happening as we meet, we'll bring them to you right away. All this is in the wake of a rather desperate and uneven attempt by Team Trump to undercut Michael Cohen's credibility. It was, to be generous, hit and miss. Defense attorney Todd Blanch had a second chance at cross-examining Michael Cohen after a day of rest yesterday. And he moved around from topic to topic so quickly that Todd Blanch decided that Todd Blanch should apologize to the jurors who would decide his client Donald Trump's fate. He said this, quote, "Sorry, we're jumping around a bit," end quote. Todd Blanch tried to use Cohen's words against him, including Cohen's fiery comments criticizing Donald Trump, things he said on his podcast, as well as Michael Cohen's admission that he lied to Congress, to which Michael Cohen pointed out it was all in service of Donald Trump and done in coordination with an attorney for Donald Trump. Todd Blanch also tried to make Cohen out to be disgruntled and angry about Trump not taking him to the White House. It earned Todd Blanch 24 objections from prosecutors. The vast majority of those objections were sustained by Judge Juan Bashan. And through it all, Cohen proved himself a very well-prepared and unflappable witness. During one particularly tense moment, Blanch did manage to undermine one part of Cohen's direct testimony. It's something that was not significant enough to have been discussed here. We went back and checked our transcripts, but it was a piece of testimony from Michael Cohen elicited on direct about a phone call Cohen said was made in the days before he paid Stormy Daniels $130,000 in hush money. Cohen says he told Trump about the payment, but Blanch today claimed that Cohen was talking to Keith Schiller about being prank called by a 14-year-old. Before Cohen's cross-examination at the very start of court today, there was a lengthy sidebar. It included a complaint from the district attorney's office about Trump's allies muscling around in court, what we on this program have referred to as the Red Tie Brigade. Prosecutor Susan Hoffinger asked that they not be allowed to file in during the middle of court proceedings, arguing that witnesses and jurors can see it. Today, a whole new group of Trump sycophants appeared in court, including several of his fellow coup plotters. Jeffrey Clark was free. So was Matt Gaetz. It's where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Here at the table, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman. He joins us after spending the morning down at the courthouse. Also back from the courthouse, New York Times investigative reporter Suzanne Craig. Also joining us, former Brooklyn prosecutor Charles Coleman. We're going to start, as we always do, with my friend and colleague, NBC's Vaughn Hilliard, outside the courthouse for us. Vaughn Hilliard, let me start with what's happening right now. Do you have any insights into what is being discussed with Judge Juan Bashan?
There's currently, with the jury having already been dismissed, Nicole, there is now a conversation like one this morning that started for 20 minutes in private, where there was discussions over the extent to which previous trials, which previous information about Michael Cohen could be brought before the jury here. But there is currently here their deliberation over the extent to which there are questions, as I'm trying to pull up here in real time, Nicole. I'm sorry I got lost here in the dock for a quick moment. But this is a little bit where we're getting into the weeds here, and our own producer Gary Grumbach inside is noting that this is where, again, we're at late points in this trial here, and literally as we thought that maybe today would be the day that Todd Blanch would finish his cross-examination of Michael Cohen, you now have a moment here where there is last-minute negotiating over what can be brought before this jury ahead of what is now going to be a three-day weekend here for them.
So just take us through what is expected to happen. The cross-examination is not over. It picks up again on Monday, and then there would be a redirect. So the prosecutors are taking notes of any, I think we should say we're all grown-ups. We're not going to grade on a curve. Todd Blanch seemed to have made one good point about Michael Cohen's direct testimony about this phone call from October 24th. But the prosecution obviously preparing and taking notes on anything. What is your sense of how long that will be, the redirect, the chance for prosecutors to go back and talk to Michael Cohen after he's been cross-examined for 3 days by Todd Blanch?
Right. I think it'll really depend after this cross-examination completes, the extent to which they feel like Michael Cohen was able to share a story here with this jury that was compelling, believable, and do they need to go and try to fix some of the stories, particularly that October 24th phone call between Keith Schiller and what Michael says included Donald Trump. But let's also be very clear here. Going into that lunch break, that is where the October 24th phone call was called into question by Todd Blanch in whether those text messages would suggest that the conversation between Michael Cohen and Keith Schiller were something different than what Michael Cohen testified on Monday to that conversation being. But the one part about this is that we were looking this afternoon what other parts of Michael Cohen's story would be called into question. There were at least 6 other phone calls in October of 2016 that Michael Cohen testified to this jury about, in which he says that Donald Trump was giving directives to him to complete that $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels. You didn't hear any questioning about those 6 other phone calls. You haven't heard any questioning yet about the August 2015 conversation at Trump Tower between Michael Cohen, David Pecker, and Donald Trump. You didn't hear any questioning about the January 17th, 2017 meeting, 3 days before inauguration, where after Alan Weisselberg and Michael Cohen allegedly scratched down on paper how he was going to be reimbursed, and that meeting inside of Trump's office that Michael says took place in which Donald Trump approved how the reimbursement checks were going to get back to him. We didn't hear any questioning about that story. You also didn't hear any questioning so far about the February 8th, 2017 meeting in the Oval Office in which Michael Cohen says he talked to Donald Trump about getting the assurance that, in fact, he would get those 11 checks over the course of the year 2017. So there is much of the story that Michael Cohen told this jury on Monday and Tuesday that under cross-examination he is yet to be questioned about. So a lot right now is very much hanging on that October 24th phone call that was being called into question. And Michael Cohen, when he was asked about how he could recollect these specific phone calls, when he had 1,400 calls a month at that period of time, he said, these were really important phone calls, and I've been telling this story for 6 years, and for 6 years my story has not changed, and it's not changing today.
It seems, Andrew Weissman, that all of the efforts to smear Michael Cohen are in some ways a bulwark against whatever Todd Blanch is doing, right? I mean, they elicited from Hope Hicks that he wasn't the kind of guy who would pay out of his pocket for anything. He elicited from David Pecker that Michael Cohen didn't have a leash long enough to buy his own cup of coffee. He elicited from every witness evidence that Michael Cohen never would have spent enough money. I mean, Michael Cohen didn't have a budget to buy lunch without Donald Trump's permission.
Are you reading from my notes?
No! I can barely see mine.
That is the script that is going to be flipped in summation. You already know the state is on that. What is this phrase, like a duck on a June bug? They are on that. They know that is why Hope Hicks said when this is supposed to be Michael Cohen out of the goodness of his heart did this. So they're going to say, look, for all of this as being a louse, I mean, that's just one more reason. And as Michael Cohen testified, he said, I told him not just because I wanted credit, that's what the rules are, but he wanted to get repaid.
Right.
So if you want to get repaid, you need to tell him. They're going to have to come up with a different theory, which is he did this as a sort of investment to sort of getting good with Trump and see if he would sort of bring him to the White House, and that when that didn't happen, he was so angry that he was only the personal counsel to the president of the United States. So I have to say, as a lawyer, I'm not sympathetic to that story. It's oh, gee, I'm only going to be the personal counsel to the president, like David Kendall and Bob Bauer. I mean, these are the cream of the crop, and it's this is Michael Cohen. I mean, so there's this disparity in caliber, and so that's their big problem, is sort of taking small pieces and stringing together a narrative that actually holds water. And I think that's why Vaughn is so right to say, look, but how does what happened, let's just think about it analytically, how does that explain everything? And even the October 24th call, where there was this absolutely good reason to think that something came up about this harassing call. This is not an either or. I mean, it's like, you know what, you can walk and chew gum. I mean, that isn't sort of a gotcha. And that is not the most important call. I actually think one of the most important calls is the two calls with Donald Trump on the 26th of October, where he says, yes, go ahead and make the payment because, you know what, we can't delay anymore.
I'm going to sneeze. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's pollen season here. I had a piece of pollen in my throat for the entire 2 hours. It made its way to my nose today.
It's all right. We'll talk a lot.
We can just keep talking about it. Oh, I'm so sorry. I guess everything happens here, right? Live TV for 2 hours. I mean, what is your sense of the dog that hasn't barked yet? I mean, Michael Cohen hasn't fallen apart. He hasn't melted. He hasn't erupted. He hasn't stood up and screamed, you know, liar, liar, pants. I mean, Michael Cohen has kept his you-know-what together under a cross so bad that the person carrying it out has apologized to the jury in front of the jury.
Right. We did hear Michael Cohen yell once this morning, though, and it was during a recording. It was the first time the jurors have actually heard the other side of Michael Cohen. But he has really kept it together under pressure. I mean, it's especially today. I maybe just have a little bit of a different take on calling balls and strikes here on what happened today in court. And I think both things can be true. We should talk about that. But I also think that they did some damage to Michael Cohen today. They spent, I don't know how many hours, several hours this morning going through his lies. And it's at points you were just like, where are they going? Because it was moving everywhere. But they were not just minor lies. They were lies under oath, just like he is under oath now. They did that, and then they lead up to the call. And I thought it was effective. I thought it cast some doubt on the credibility of that call. He has a 1-minute and 36-second call that he places to Keith Schiller. And right before that, he's not just getting one harassing call. He's getting multiple harassing calls from an unknown number. One time the person forgets to hide the number, he gets the number. He has a long back and forth with the person saying, and the person's 14 years old, allegedly. We don't know this for sure. We don't know what's going on here, but the person's like, oh, I'm really sorry. And Michael's like, I'm very Michael Cohen. I'm going to sick the Secret Service on you. And they have a whole exchange.
Michael Cohen wasn't a protectee of the Secret Service.
I know, but this is the threat. And then he calls Keith Schiller. And in that call, he managed apparently to achieve both to relay all this information about the harassing phone call to Keith Schiller, and then he manages also to get through to the president and relay the information about the payment to Stormy has been made. That could have happened, but I felt that it was effective, that they cast some doubt on it. But to Vaughn's point, even if they did, there's so much more evidence that they haven't even brought up. Most of the cross-examination has simply been a character assassination of Michael Cohen, and not to say that they don't need to do that, but they haven't spoken to so much of the evidence already, and it looks like they're wrapping up. So I think they're hoping that this one shot that they think is effective will cast doubt on everything. I'm skeptical of that, but I did think today they got a hit in, and it's not a knockout, but it was a hit.
We say every day we have no idea what's landing with the jury. I have been on a jury 2 times, so I only speak as a former juror. Sometimes what you're experiencing is agitation that you're still there. Sometimes you're riveted. Sometimes you are feeling what the lawyers want. We have no idea.
No idea.
I want to ask you, Charles, about something David Kelly said on this program, which is that he has put up witnesses, and I think his word was schizophrenic drug addicts, and he was quick to say Michael Cohen isn't that. Mm-hmm. But once a case has been established, to the degree that this case has been established through documents, through witnesses very friendly and affectionate toward the defendant, you're, in his example, schizophrenic drug addict. It doesn't, you know, what they say, they're there as a corroborator. So the mission itself, stepping back, of destroying, smearing, and maligning a witness who the prosecution on direct was pretty thorough in impugning and indicting his past conduct, including, I think, everything Todd Blanch went over today, the lies to Congress, the guilty pleas, the prison. I think the prosecution had dealt with most of those chapters of Michael Cohen's life on direct.
I think that the prosecution has ample space to make this case not about Michael Cohen's testimony, given everything else that they've presented on their case in chief. There's so much other evidence that they can rely on in terms of summation, where you don't have to necessarily put Michael Cohen at the center in terms of his credibility and everything that he talked about. There are enough other witnesses who provided evidence and testimony that has placed Michael Cohen in the room, that has made Michael Cohen an actor, such that it corroborates his account of what things are, and you don't have to take it firsthand from him if you think that he's a scumbag or unbelievable or what have you. Any prosecutor, particularly at the state level, has dealt with unsavory witnesses that we wish we had alternatives for, and you don't. And so the way around that is to focus on the evidence that works for you and the witnesses that aren't as problematic to make your case. They can easily do it. I think that the defense, in terms of where this sort of punch today landed, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. It's about the heft of the hit that they made in terms of the prosecution's case. And I would agree with Sue, this October 24th phone call is not something to sort of gloss over and miss. But to Vaughn's point, and I think Vaughn is absolutely correct, when you step back, you still have to answer the question to the jury, does this still make sense in terms of the overall narrative that you are trying to get the jury to buy? If you're the defense, to Andrew's point, are you going to try and say Michael Cohen did all of this out of the goodness of his heart? He got upset. He was still personal attorney to the President of the United States of America, and he's lying about everything. That's a lot for the jury to sort of process in one sitting. I do think, and this is important though, as we sit and have conversations about the defense and their strategy doesn't have to be as well defined as the prosecution, because all they're trying to do in any realm that they can is create reasonable doubt. I do think that there is a conversation to be had about whether the inconsistency or perceived inconsistency around this October 24th conversation creates reasonable doubt in the minds of a juror. So it's important to understand the jury's, the defense's line, it doesn't have to be straightforward. It can be all over the place because all they're trying to do is poke a hole.
Well, I guess, Vaughn, I would just say as a former juror, if I sat there for 19 days and whether I was going to decide that there was evidence that he was innocent or guilty hinged on the October 24th call, I probably wasn't going to go with guilty in the first place. I mean, what is your sense of what else Blanch has? We've just learned that Blanch plans to be done Monday before the morning break, so he doesn't have much more. So this was it, probably either his second best shot or sort of beginning of the end. I don't know I don't know how much time there is Monday before the first morning break.
Right. I think that there's a question. Does he go back to the morning of October 26, when Donald Trump and Michael Cohen had two different phone calls lasting several minutes before Cohen went and set up an account over at First Republic to begin that wire transfer? Is he going to ask him about the October 28th phone call in the 11 a.m. hour after he finalized the non-disclosure agreement with Stormy Daniels through Keith Davidson? Those are outstanding questions, and this story will come through closing arguments. And as I've learned from Andrew Weissman, it's the job of the prosecution to prove the defendant's guilt. At the same time, the defense for Donald Trump has yet to provide an alternative story or an alternative timeline to the events that the prosecution has detailed in chronological order. The defense team, Todd Blanch and Susan Necklace, they have not provided for this jury a more specific timeline of when Donald Trump did, in fact, become familiar with this alleged arrangement of $130,000 from Michael Cohen to Stormy Daniels. Was it in early February 2018 after the Wall Street Journal wrote about it? Those are some of those outstanding questions that, frankly, the jury in closing arguments, when they're looking at the two-side storylines, they're very different because Donald Trump publicly hasn't answered those questions. And so far, his defense attorneys haven't tried to paint their own clear version of events for this jury either.
So Andrew, on that point of Vaughn's, I mean, so the defense's story is that he didn't have sex with Stormy Daniels. He did make every single decision. He did require his CFOs and other lieutenants to haggle down every single bill, and he did pay more than 2x what the reimbursement is to Stormy Cohen without looking at it.
And didn't take any negative actions with respect to Weisselberg and Cohen. In other words, this is somebody who
to Vaughn's also other point, I'm sorry, Cohen's in the fold till 18.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So the idea is this has happened behind his back, which, we know from everyone is not supposed to happen. And as Michael Cohen has repeatedly said today, like, if I did that, I'd be fired. So this is all happening. The story has to be it's all happening behind his back. And he did not know about it. And what happens? Weisselberg and Cohen, according to Hope Hicks, Hope Hicks has him saying, thank God Michael did this. I mean, this isn't what the hell did you do? And I can't believe that you passed these checks to me and I didn't know what I was signing. And I'm paying you twice as much money as I should be. And you never told me.
And I did it 12 times.
And by the way, I'm now on record saying I reimbursed Michael Cohen for payments to a porn star. I mean, it's not like he hasn't admitted that. So the narrative is going to be difficult. I wanted to just raise one thing.
Please.
Because this is definitely like you always try your last case. A blunder.
I can't wait for this.
This is going to be the Mueller investigation. But there was Todd Blanch did do a better job today. As I said, low bar, but he did do a better job. But with respect to the testimony where Michael Cohen lies in front of Congress, and and the lies are distancing Donald Trump from the Moscow Tower, that is...
We should say what they are. He lies about the times that he talked to Trump about building a Trump Tower Moscow.
Exactly.
It was 10 and he says 3 before Congress.
Exactly.
But there's reasons why.
And he wants to also make it earlier. So he's trying to basically be like, don't worry, not during the campaign, and it was much smaller.
No collusion.
It was very much like this. It was earlier and it was little. And so and Todd Blanch goes to that and says, and you submitted a 2-page document. This wasn't your spur-of-the-moment testimony. This was a 2-page document that's false. And Michael Cohen on cross, this is like you shouldn't be bringing out bad facts, says, yes, that's not just my statement. That false statement that I admitted was perjury, which, by the way, could only have been done for the president, right? Michael Cohen had zero interest personally in that. That was done by a joint defense committee that included the president of the United States lawyer. Right. I mean, that was like if you want sort of the Costello, like what's happening behind the scenes, what are the lawyers doing? I mean, he just directly implicated Donald Trump in that scheme.
Well, and back to the narrative that you keep bringing us back to, if the narrative is that he rolled like a mob boss, Cohen on cross gave them another example of how he did that.
Totally.
So I don't know if you saw this. Did we show that? Trump is talking. We're listening, so you don't have to. If he's made any news, we'll tell you about it on the other side of a very short break. No one goes anywhere. An update from court. As we mentioned, proceedings are done for the day. Michael Cohen will be back Monday for the end of cross and what we expect to be redirect. The prosecution will have an opportunity to do that if they choose. Still to come for us, a gaggle of House Republicans and even an indicted coup plotter today felt that their presence at the criminal trial of their dear leader, Donald J. Trump, was more important than any work they had lined up in Washington, D.C. How their presence was received when our special coverage of the first ever criminal trial of an American ex-president continues after a short break. Don't go anywhere.
You need to know that Mr. Trump's personal lawyers reviewed and edited my statement to Congress about the timing of the Moscow Tower negotiations before I gave it. So to be clear, Mr. Trump knew of and directed the Trump-Moscow negotiations throughout the campaign and lied about it. He lied about it because he never expected to win. He also lied about it because he stood to make hundreds of millions of dollars on the Moscow real estate project. And so I lied about it too, because Mr. Trump had made clear to me through his personal statements to me that we both knew to be false, and through his lies to the country that he wanted me to lie. And he made it clear to me because his personal attorneys reviewed my statement before I gave it to Congress.
So I wonder if you think that that'll come up on redirect.
I don't know that there's anything to clean up. This is, cross-examination, when you're a prosecutor, your heart's sort of in your throat because, you're just, want to see, have you prepared the witness well? Is there something you don't know? How's the witness going to do? Because it's scary and they could be nervous and they can cave.
Because they're humans, not robots.
They're humans. And, one of the tricks of and I don't mean tricks in a bad way, one of the things that defense lawyers do to try and shake someone from a story is the person gives an answer and said, no, that didn't happen. And then they go, Nicole, are you telling me, like this? And you're like, okay, well, I don't think it happened. I mean, it's a normal reaction. So what you're doing is you're taking detailed notes and you usually you have a line down this side of your pad. And over here, you write down issues that you might want to clean up. And then the judgment call is doing some triage as to what really matters. It's usually a mistake to just go down a rabbit hole. You sort of want to figure out, if you're going to do redirect, what are the key things that you want to clean up? Is there something that was there was such a misimpression? Or was there something that was so misleading? Here, Cohen cleaned it up because Cohen's like, oh, that false statement? I mean, that was just a misstep by Blanche. So I don't think that's one. There was one where they tried to make it sound like it was because Cohen lied to Judge Pauly about accepting responsibility, that is the reason that Judge Pauly at the sentencing of Michael Cohen gave him a lower sentence. Again, to go back to the case I last tried, I know that the main reason he would have gotten a lower sentence is that he fully cooperated with the special counsel Mueller investigation. Remember, there were two cases. There was the Southern District case and there was the Mueller case. And he had fully cooperated. And we told the judge that. And everyone agreed that he could get credit, which is what happens when you cooperate. So, it's not like he got credit for not cooperating. He got credit presumably from the judge because he did cooperate.
Right. I mean, I guess what's curious to me, and again, not being a lawyer, I have no idea what thought goes into, I mean, a defense team deals with what they have to work with. Right. What is so incriminating is the 12 pieces of paper with the signatures on them. What is so incriminating is we know from Stringer Bell, you don't put a criminal conspiracy on paper, boys and girls. But they did, and it's got chicken scratch on it, and that's where they gross up what they're reimbursing him with. We've got Rudy Giuliani going on TV and saying, well, the money was funneled through Michael Cohen and pages. I mean,
we have a tape.
I mean, nothing that is incriminating and imperils Donald Trump legally has been any of the substance or tone or spirit or topic of the cross.
No, there's been powerful evidence that's been entered, and the 34 counts involve the documents, the checks, the general ledger, and nothing has come up to question that at all yet. They do have to get to criminal intent, and it's going to involve the conversations. But despite what happened today, there are still multiple corroborating witnesses who gave testimony coming into Michael Cohen. So when Michael Cohen talked, it was a very familiar story, and they have not come back. They have two things. They have not come back and really gone near any of his testimony about the heart of the matter, be it the records or about the meetings that he had where he talked to Donald Trump, just the one phone call. And I think that's important. And then I'm also struck by, I've been there every day, and I don't have a narrative yet of exactly how Donald Trump didn't know about this. We heard from one witness that he was in the White House busy just randomly signing checks and wasn't really paying attention. But that cuts across against so much evidence and just the man we know, the micromanager that's Donald Trump. We've heard it. Maybe that Weiselberg and Cohen cooked this up, but that really doesn't have legs. So it's hard. It's harder for somebody. If I'm looking for a narrative for the defense, which I have been, I want to hear it. We're still now going into closing arguments without a strong narrative on top of the other things I mentioned.
But I have to remind you, they don't have to have a narrative.
I know, but I'd like one.
It is the prosecution's burden to establish their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think that has to be understood because big picture-wise, The prosecution and the defense in this case have two very different goals. The prosecution is trying to persuade 12 jurors beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump is guilty. The defense is looking to get one juror who's not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt to hold out.
Well, in fairness, though, they've given us strings of a defense. I'd just like to hear a bit more. I mean, they don't have to, but they've actually provided it.
I don't have the clarity.
Right.
As a juror, you when you go in there with the other people, you want to have a thing to hang whatever you've decided to do on. And I think I think maybe we're talking past each other. You want a thing to go in and defend where you come down on. I don't know that they've given anyone a thing on the most incriminating evidence. I want to bring Bon Hilliard back in on this. A little bit of suspense, I guess. I don't want to oversell it, but a little bit of lack of clarity about who they're talking about. I know some news organizations have reported that a lawyer whose name has come up, maybe that final witness. I'm not sure if that's what we're reporting, but what is your sense of the one person that might be maybe the one witness that the defense calls maybe, if they do?
Robert Costello, who was at the heart of the testimony on Tuesday, in which Michael Cohen was articulating that Costello, who was a Trump-allied lawyer back in 2018 and had close relationships with Trump, was in close contact with Rudy Giuliani, his friend, and Rudy Giuliani's client was Donald Trump. And Costello, though, who Michael Cohen says never entered into a formal legal arrangement with, has publicly suggested over the last year that Michael Cohen had acknowledged that they were trying to extort Donald Trump, and that he was doing this not through Donald Trump's direction. And so Costello has been refuted this allegation by Michael Cohen directly here, and there are emails from 2018 that have already been entered into the record that show Robert Costello suggesting to Michael Cohen at a point right before he flipped, you could say, suggesting that he had friends in high places and telling him that he was in contact with his friend who was in touch with his client, that meaning Rudy Giuliani with Donald Trump. And this was all before Michael Cohen ultimately broke and began testifying under oath against Donald Trump. So Robert Costello has told our Tom Winter that he is prepared to come testify, but at this point in time, he has not been asked to be here in Lower Manhattan at this point in time.
And Vaughn, there is some expectation that the Judge Juan Bashan, has indicated that both sides should be prepared to present their summations on Tuesday, presuming they're done on Monday, and he's also indicated that he would like to get both summations done on the same day. Is that right?
Right. The cross-examination of Michael Cohen should end Monday morning, and then you ultimately have the summations. There are some questions around, obviously, Wednesday is usually a day the court is not taking place. The court had sought to bring the jurors together. There is at least one juror who is not able to make that happen, so there will not be court on Wednesday. And then Thursday, one of the jurors, it's not clear, it may be an alternate, has to leave by 1 p.m. on Thursday. And so, I know the idea was to hopefully avoid coming back after Memorial Day and allowing the jurors to go consider a verdict shortly after these closing arguments. But all of a sudden, we're looking at a very tight timeline here next week, especially with the fact that the prosecution's own witness has yet to even finish their questioning. And of course, if Robert Costello takes a stand, and just a few moments ago, right before they left the courthouse, Todd Blanch still, we should note, did not shut the door on Donald Trump, the defendant, taking the stand himself.
What do you make of all this sort of posturing?
Well, as we discussed yesterday, I think with respect to the defendant not testifying, one, it's legitimate to always, make that decision late in the day to sort of make sure. But even if they know that it's not going to happen, it's useful to have the state be worrying about it because it's going to eat up some of their time.
Do they ever testify?
Sometimes. I mean, this would not be the case that I'm joining a raft of people. I mean, I don't know that there's anyone who I've heard anyone say it would be a good idea. Yeah. That might be a universe of one, but the one being the person who can make the choice, right. Which is Donald Trump. I don't think that's going to happen. With Costello, it's sort of interesting just because I don't think he's on the defense witness list. So, that I think raises some issues for the state is to, you're supposed to have a list of who's going to testify. There would have to be a very good reason why it was unanticipated. I'm not seeing what that argument is, but I could be missing something that happened in the record that we haven't seen yet. They'd been talking about 3 witnesses. Alan Garten, the general counsel of the Trump Organization, they said no, he's not testifying. So that left 2. One is an expert, and the other is Donald Trump. So I would be surprised if Costello testified. Just so people remember, though, he is the person who, just before the case was indicted, if you remember, the delay in indicting was that Donald Trump said, I have somebody you need to talk to, and Costello, I think, went into the grand jury and testified to the grand jury. That may be one more reason why they don't want to call him. That is the defense, because that means the prosecution has already had a really good preview of what he would say and has probably looked long and hard as to how to refute that.
Right, because whatever they do, the prosecution has a chance to cross him. The tables.
That's right. Exactly, and I remember at the time thinking, why would he go to the grand jury? Why not keep that secret, and then you could use it at trial without having told the prosecution. Having gone into the grand jury and told whatever story he told, that gives the prosecution a chance. I'm not saying he lied in the grand jury. I'm just saying that if the state thinks he did, they have a huge opportunity between a year ago when he testified in the grand jury to investigate everything about it. So they'll be ready for it.
They'll be prepared for that. All right, no one's going anywhere. Up next for us, Trump got the band together again, including coup plotters and MAGA extremists.
How it works is you got a 98% offset, okay? There's big gaps here is when you're selling a whole bunch of electricity back to the utility company.